Cuphead is a boss rush, run-and-gun game with a bit of platforming and a whole lot of absolutely enthralling cartoon visuals and snazzy music. You play as Cuphead, a cup, who got too greedy while playing a casino game of dice and lost his soul to the devil. To keep your soul, you're charged with collecting the soul contracts of all the other debtors of the devil, who serve as the bosses of the game. Now, without a doubt, the biggest pull and point of notoriety for Cuphead is its art style, which is an amazing homage and recreation of hand-drawn 1930s cartoons and animation. Though since its release, the game has also garnered attention due to how difficult it is. I want to take a look at how this punishing gameplay couples with the beautiful visuals, music, and everything else to bring about the fairly unique experience that Cuphead brings. A bit of history to the art style. The first cartoon to ever combine sound and color was Fiddlesticks, which released in 1930. It focused on a frog named Flip traveling over static, drawn backgrounds and loopily interacting with other animals and personified dancing objects, often with many looping animations. Everything is exaggerated and immensely expressive, even the piano that Flip plays. Looking at Cuphead, we see the same thing a lot. Cuphead travels through the Inkwell Isles, fighting his way against personified and very expressive plants, animals, humans, and the like, all over static, watercolor backgrounds and filled with looping animations. The easiest place to see these are in the lulls during boss fights in between attacks, and in Porcrine, the shopkeep. While the art obviously draws people in due to its uniqueness, there aren't many games that look like 1930s cartoons, it also does so because it's very accessible. Cartoons were originally a spectacle for all, something to come see and wonder at, without having to critically think too hard or overanalyze. They were a technological wonder. There isn't a lot to analyze in Fiddlesticks, it's pretty surface level stuff, which allowed people of all ages and backgrounds to quickly find the appeal in it. Again, the same thing goes for Cuphead. The surface appeal is immense as it's recreating and recapturing the magic of the dawn of cartoons for a lot of people, and it's giving players the opportunity to authentically join in that cartoon fun for the first time. Now, this isn't as crucial as the visuals in my opinion, but the music absolutely needs to be brought up. The soundtrack for the game is a collection of jazz ballads with a mix of big band and smaller groups. It's done fantastically. First, all the music by itself is catchy and well done. I wouldn't be surprised to find any of these songs populating the radio waves of 1930 through 1960 America. If you guys are familiar with the Fallout series, I wouldn't be surprised to hear a lot of these songs on the Fallout radio. And even more, all of the music is extremely catered to the game. There are the songs which directly reference things in the game, like Don't Deal with the Devil, which gives the game's exposition via barbershop quartet, or Die House, which serves as King Die's killer theme song. But you can tell that a lot of the boss soundtracks are clearly designed for the boss stage too. Example, the boss Cagney Carnation moves in an almost salsa-like motion, shaking its arms back and forth while the song Floral Fury plays. The song is filled with maracas, rapid-fire trumpet, and a collage of saxes and drums, all combining into a reoccurring melody, which would be perfect for an intense, fast-paced dance, which you could say is going on between Cuphead and the boss. The dynamic of the music is shown in the dynamic of the visuals. What you see on the screen, what you hear, come together. So that gives an overview of most of the non-gameplay features. Now I want to discuss the controls, level design, and combat gameplay, and then we'll see how these intersect or don't. So the control scheme of the game is straightforward. As you can see through the short tutorial, there are really only a few options in the game. Jumping, shooting, using your special shot, and dashing are the main set. There's also parrying, which is really just jumping again, and crouching. So the game doesn't involve any complicated button combinations or advanced techniques. The controls are simple and accessible in the same way that the visuals are. However, the same is not super true for the actual gameplay. But before delving into that, I want to bring up level design as it's very determinant of the gameplay, as it is where the gameplay takes place. For the most part, level design in boss arenas is both simple and straightforward. It's either flat ground, stationary platforms, or fairly open air. The simplicity of level design allows the combat to take precedent. You generally don't have to worry about the level except in terms of how you can use the one or two features in it to avoid getting hit. The exceptions to this would probably be the dragon and the bee boss fights, in which the platforms seem somewhat randomly generated so you have to adapt to that, but the combat and boss attacks in those sections makes up for it by being pretty simple and somewhat lethargic in pace if you would have had stationary ground. Overall, Cuphead is quite a difficult game. Your first time through will probably be accompanied by 1 to 50 deaths per boss. The first time I finished the game, I think I was at around 400 deaths. Now, I don't think there's anything revolutionary or that stand out among the gameplay in the boss fights or platforming. However, I do still think that all of the gameplay is done very well. It's very solid. Each boss is extremely visually and thematically distinct, but this carries over to combat. I never felt that I was having to employ old techniques to fight a new boss. The boss levels varied between static, dynamic, and always moving arenas. The attacks were usually unique and fitting to the boss. I did say the control setup is simple, but that doesn't mean its deployment in the game is as well. The game can get very complex very fast if you know what you're doing, even if you don't know what you're doing for that matter. Playing risky by moving into zones in which it's easier to get hit often reward the player by allowing them for more damage with different weapons, like the spread shot. It also rewards ability to focus on offense while playing defense. The auto-aim chaser allows you to solely focus on dodging. The bullets will find their target for you. But this comes at a hefty cost in low damage. The DPS for the chaser is only 15.6. This damage is dwarfed by the strongest weapon in the game, the charge shot, which has a DPS of 40, but requires aiming and delay for every single shot, meaning it's a lot easier to miss, and if you don't charge it all the way, you're going to get very poor damage. This means that a lot of focus is taken away from dodging. The game does not have much customization, but the dynamics in weapon variety fortunately allow for at least a few different strategies while fighting bosses. On the solely defense side of things, there is essentially always a way to avoid getting hit. Whether that be through better positioning or being ready to make a risky dash, the majority of deaths will be your own fault, which they have to be or the game could not have succeeded. It's hard enough to get people to play a game in which you fairly die a lot. It would be impossible to get people to play a game in which you unfairly die a lot. You'll generally be able to see what you did wrong and know what to do better next time. Though speaking from experience, it could take 20 tries to actually consistently make that better move. Now this complexity and difficulty is, in my eyes, very juxtaposed with everything else. The accessibility and even familiarity of the silly cartoon visuals and the groove and soundtrack is at odds with the difficulty and the high learning curve that the game reveals. This dichotomy acts to engage multiple faculties of enjoyment while playing. The upbeat visuals and music brings the player up while the bosses continually beat the player down. I'd say that the most popular example of a similar crushingly difficult game in recent history is the Souls franchise, which, rather than employ a dichotomy between welcoming graphics and punishing gameplay like Cuphead does, fully commits to the difficulty of gameplay with a complementary dark and brooding world. I'm not saying one of these methodologies is better or worse in gaming, but realizing the difference is important if we want to understand Cuphead and appreciate it for what it is. I'd even go to say most games take the Dark Souls approach of making gameplay and everything else complementary. It's a lot more straightforward of an approach, and that really works. Dark Souls is an amazing series, and the combination of similar themes between gameplay and audio visuals really hits the overall feel of the game home. The dark world and ominous music adds to the tough combat to create a very rough atmosphere and an almost sinister tone. But having a game that instead puts its gameplay at odds with other features allows us a different sort of feeling and enjoyment. Cuphead in particular activates not only our appreciation of difficulty, but also our more silly enjoyment and nostalgia of things like Saturday morning cartoons. If you know anything about my channel, you know I fully appreciate the Souls approach. It lets developers evoke deeper levels of specific feelings, much more so than a game like Cuphead. But Cuphead simply offers something that is not found as frequently. Fortunately, the developers did a very good job of pulling off this dichotomy, so it avoids a potential pitfall of feeling shallow in both gameplay and everything else. Instead, it pairs solid, difficult gameplay with more upbeat visuals, music, and level design to create a game that lets us experience a wide range of emotions and enjoyment at once. So that's really my main point in the video, is seeing that other side of things that we don't normally see in games. But I still have two things I want to bring up, and I didn't really have a great spot to put them previously. Those things are the expressions of characters throughout this game and parrying. The expressions are really the only time I think the visuals line up with the combat, and parrying is, to me, a microcosm of the dichotomy that I've gone over. On expressions, almost every set of eyes in the game, even Cuphead's and Mugman's, are aggressive and combative. The bosses take very menacing looks, like they really want to send you to the afterlife. The way they're drawn makes it look like they're having fun with the violence as well. This still connects with the old style of cartoons, as animators back in the day, and now, definitely would have wanted their characters to look like they were having fun to make sure audience had fun with them. But in Cuphead, this reveling in the fight is the secluded example of some other feature lining up to a T with the gameplay and combat. I think it's a very well done exception. So lastly, and I think pretty fitting, is parrying. The point of this video was to look at how gameplay is juxtaposed with the rest of the game in Cuphead to bring about different emotions in the player at the same time. Parrying represents this, and most of how I've seen other content creators talk about parrying, I think, supports this claim. It's always seen as a pretty weird thing. So almost any parryable object is something that can damage you. You have to jump and jump again into the object, but you're rewarded with another playing card for special moves if you land the parry. If you fail, you take damage. So jumping into damaging items is a bit unintuitive in the first place, but then to boot, every parryable object is pink. Pink is a kind of, at least interesting color choice for this. Pink is symbolically a delicate color that represents things like sweet, nice, playful. This is starkly at odds with damaging projectiles that can lead to death or put you in a bad position. The positive and negative feelings wrapped up in parrying are a more clear example of the same phenomena happening through the entire game, and it's pretty cool to me. That's why I made the video. So that about wraps up all of my thoughts on Cuphead in terms of gameplay versus everything else. This was somewhat like a review, but not quite, since I was more focusing on, I guess I'd say, part of the game. It wasn't a comprehensive review. I hope you enjoyed. I do want to do more analysis like this, so if you like this kind of stuff, let me know however you want to. And thanks again for watching. Have a good day.